What is going on, everybody? Travis Fowler Harkrider is back once again this week with a new edition of Tights and Turnbuckles. After I was away visiting some family last week, I am back this week to do the one thing that we love to do here on this show, and that is talk pro wrestling. So let's get right into it, and let's do a quick recap of some of the big moments from this past week, starting with Raw, where we have a new number one contender for the World Heavyweight Championship official, and it's Damian Priest. And Gunter, who displayed in a promo a little bit of humbleness in a very interesting twist, is now going to look at his next opponent, the former world champion that he beat at SummerSlam. And Damian Priest actually has been coming into his own quite a bit. I actually am very pleased with all the character work I've seen with him. We've also seen on the Raw side the Final Testament Wyatt 6 feud that had the new video with Miz captured by Bo Dallas, which, by the way, I had completely had forgotten about the Miz Taraj, and that Bo Dallas was a part of the Miz Taraj alongside Curtis Axel as part of what would later be known as the B Team. And that is a perfect way to remind people the history between those two. So Miz also was captured by Dexter Lumis when he first came onto the main became on the main roster. I'll get it right. And so that was a nice little nod there. The New Day is also continuing their descent into a breakup. We'll see how that ends up playing out. If I didn't make it obvious before, I can't wait to see how the Final Testament Wyatt 6 feud plays out. But also on Raw, we saw the aftermath of Rhea Ripley being attacked by Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez. They have said that Rhea Ripley is officially out with a fractured orbital socket, but the injury doesn't seem to be as bad as what they were anticipating it be. So everybody's hopeful that she's going to be back for WrestleMania season. I'm guessing around Royal Rumble is when we'll see her, which is perfect timing for a great surprise. And we saw the continuation of the Bloodline saga going forward right now with Jey Uso and Jimmy having a conversation with Sami Zayn that at the end would lead Jey to invite Sami to SmackDown this past week. And we'll talk about how all that played out this past week. On NXT, we saw them go back to a familiar territory for some of the old-timer fans and some of the people that were competing on the show that night, the 2300 Arena, a.k.a. the ECW Arena. And the show overall was actually a really fun show. The Javon Evans-Wes Lee match was really fun. I really was not a fan of the whole RVD being attacked thing by Wes Lee that later would cause RVD to get involved in the match. I think Wes Lee and Javon Evans are going to have a great feud if they want to continue that forward. I think they should. They seem to have a great amount of chemistry together. Dawn Marie being a special referee in the hardcore match. Jada Parker is just continuing to build her stock even further, and she did it again this past week. NXT was just a lot of fun. I know that there was some gripe about it being in the ECW arena, but at the same time, I think it kind of gave it that little extra added oomph for the show. By the way, Lola Vice is just coming into her own on NXT. I think she's going to be a great character for the women's division, which, by the way, we'll talk about the women's division and the absolutely stacked division that it is. The main event proved that. You look over then at Trick Williams and his tag match with Bubba Ray Dudley to go against Ethan Page. And good Lord, my throat is just going nonstop. I'm actually at a show. This is why we're doing this unconventional recording this week, because I am actually at my show, about ready to do some commentary for Wrestling for a Cause based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I digress. The tag match with Ethan Page and Ridge Holland against Bubba Ray and Trick Williams also ended up being a lot of fun. The return of Devon at the end for the table spot was a lot of fun. But the main event, the 10-woman tag match that had a legit all-star of people in that match for NXT. Yeah, NXT has the best and most stacked women's division of any company, I feel like, right now. They're the one that's got the forefront. That's not to say that other divisions for women are necessarily bad, but NXT has the best one going currently. and with the names that were involved. I also got a little excited about the whole incident between Zarya and the juggernaut Jordan Grace is very appealing. I'd love to see a match eventually between those two, and we may get that sooner rather than later. Reports are indicating that Grace's contract with TNA is coming up at the beginning of 2025, and I think it's pretty safe to assume she's WWE bound, and rightfully so. Over on the AEW side of things, I'm not disparaging them, not going to say that it was a terrible show, but I just wasn't as interested in the show like I have been in the past. But I want to commend AEW by putting attention back on some of their homegrown talent. You're seeing Private Party get a rejuvenation. Powerhouse Hobbs came back. Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay are getting a lot of time when it comes to their story. There's just a lot of good things where it looks like AEW is going back to its root system and actually putting the focus on some of its other homegrown stars. Daniel Garcia continues to raise his stock, especially with the Collision promo with Jack Perry he had last night. Orange Cassidy and his feud with Jon Moxley. I I enjoy Serious Orange. It just hasn't convinced me yet, and I don't know if I'm sold on it being a great main event for the title. The Hurt Syndicate coming back is beautiful. I have to admit, I do really wish that Cedric Alexander would have actually not re-signed with WWE and gone over to them, because they would have been able to have the original four all can use their names too, which would have been absolutely amazing. And to reform the Hurt Syndicate as opposed to Hurt Business, which we know is the same thing. I kind of hope they just keep it at three of them, but I have a feeling that they're going to add somebody in there as well. Um, Mercedes Moné and Chris Statlander, I wish I could say that I'm involved in that match and really invested. I am not. I actually am not a fan of how Camille has been treated going into this. It's almost like they're preparing for the breakup between Monet and Camille in like a month, and y'all just put them together, what, a couple months back? And she's pretty much already lost her aura as it is, which I really hate saying that because, as I've said on a previous episode, I'm a big fan of Camille, but it just doesn't seem like she's going to have really any momentum at the moment. They're pretty much taking that away as being like the diesel for Mercedes Shawn Michaels. And it's disappointing because I feel like she has a lot to offer, and I feel like she has a lot to offer to Mercedes too. So it's a little disappointing to see how that's played out, but maybe they'll turn the ship around. I don't know. Only time will tell to see where that's going to end up going. And then over on SmackDown. Um, I don't think there has to be too much to talk about outside of the obvious things that have taken place. I got to say, I'm a big fan of the Randy Orton, Kevin Owens, Cody Rhodes story right now. They're utilizing the pile driver, which I've seen a lot of people complain about how, oh, that's such a tame move now, yada, yada, yada. But they're selling it as a dangerous move, which is the point of the pile driver. It is a dangerous move. And using it on Randy for this Kevin Owens feud has been amazing. I'm very happy to see them utilizing that. Um, the big announcement that we are now going to have finally a women's mid-card title on the main roster, and it's the Women's United States Championship. And yes, it's the men's title just with a white strap and it says women's on it. Oh well, who cares? It's a mid-card title. It gives more opportunities. And I'm very happy to see that for the women's division, because much like the success of the NXT Women's North American title, this is going to help the women of SmackDown establish new stars and new champions. I know we're eventually going to get a women's Intercontinental Championship now, and I can't wait to see that either. I think that'll be great for both women's divisions on Raw and SmackDown. A lot of people have already speculated who they want to be the first women's U.S. champion. I know who I have my pick for. It really only comes down to two gals. I really either want to see Michin get it, because I feel like she's put in a lot of time and work for it, and somebody who's put in just as much work and has become such a character in WWE for all the right reasons. Chelsea Green, I think, would be a great first women's United States champion. And honestly, I hope that's the route they go. We'll see what ends up happening. But this is great news for the women's division. And again, it's only a matter of time now before we see the women's IC title come into the picture. So it's just a question of when, not if at this point. But SmackDown was capped off with a great Bloodline segment. This story it's unbelievable how far they have stretched this, because it does get entertaining. And I know some people thought that the new Bloodline story with Solo as the tribal chief was really fading out. And maybe at the beginning it felt that way, but as it has gone on, especially with the additions of the Tongans and Fatu, man, they have all just come together so well. This is a very believable bloodline. And we had the reunion. We saw the reunion take place of the OG bloodline, the pre-Solo OG bloodline, in the Usos, Sami Zayn returning to the fold, and Roman Reigns. By the way, before I go any further into this and talk about Survivor Series, oh Lord, if this is not going to give Kevin Owens more reason to not like Sami Zayn. His best friend, like I said on my video 2 weeks ago, his best friend, Sami Zayn, had a historic split from the bloodline that involved Kevin Owens and the two of them taking the tag titles off the Usos. So I guarantee you this is going to lead to another Zayn storyline with Owens. And I, again, will not be surprised if the heavyweight title, more specifically the WWE title, is on the line come WrestleMania between the two, because I think it's a WrestleMania worthy program. Now, getting back to the end of SmackDown, OG Bloodline is here, and the War Games match is official. 4-on-4, the new Bloodline of Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, Tonga Loa, and Jacob Fatu taking on the OG Bloodline, Roman Reigns, Jay and Jimmy Uso, and Sami Zayn. This is going to be an awesome War Games match. I cannot wait to see it. It should be a lot of fun going into Survivor Series. Now, let's backtrack a little bit to Crown Jewel, where we saw some of this stuff start to unfold. Overall, I was not very much pleased with Crown Jewel. Like, it just wasn't a show that I was really invested into. We saw the Bloodline stuff take place, and then we saw how the aftermath has spilled over to now we've got Survivor Series set. So I think it was a great step in the right direction in that instance for Crown Jewel. The Crown Jewel championships have been crowned in Liv Morgan and Cody Rhodes. Good for them both. Matches were decent enough, and at least we know they're not going to carry around those big A titles, because they're going to stay in Saudi Arabia, and it's like they're using a Super Bowl ring, almost sort of like the Dynamite Diamond ring. So maybe a little bit of WWE taking a bit from AEW, kind of, maybe. I don't know. I think there's some similarities, but that's just me. Then overall, Crown Jewel was just not something that I think is going to be something to remember necessarily. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just not a great thing either. It's just kind of there. It was just almost a glorified house show this time around, which Crown Jewels haven't felt that way in a couple of years. But this is the first one in quite a while where I'm like, yeah, it's just here. It's just that time of year, and it is what it is, and it's helping lead into Survivor Series. But that's my take on it. You can have your own opinion, if you will, on it. Let's move forward and talk about some of the unfortunate news on the releases for WWE, or just contract renewals not taking place. The three names that were noted, one of which was very shocking. Actually, to be honest, two of them were very shocking. Tegan Knox was announced to be let go from the company. It's sad, but at the same time, they didn't really utilize her enough, and she had been kind of injury prone with 2 knee injuries that took her out for quite some time. So it's disappointing, and I hate to hear that for Nyx Newell, but I think she'll do just fine on the indies when her 90-day non-compete kicks out. And then the two more shocking ones. First, Indy Hartwell, who was just on SmackDown the day she was released. It was a taped SmackDown, and she came out with Candice LeRae. And by the way, Candice LeRae coming out earlier in SmackDown this past week and still doing the hand pose that somebody pointed out was just a little heart-wrenching, because I wish Indy would have stuck around. I really wish they would have kept Indy Hartwell. I think she has a lot to offer personally. But I think the most surprising of all, because the more I thought about it, I kind of wish they would have put Baron Corbin in the Final Testament somehow as kind of like the enforcer for Karrion Kross, so to speak, or maybe like similar to his equal, whatever you want to call it. Baron Corbin being let go and his contract not being renewed is severely disappointing. It's even more disappointing because, as it was brought up, he was just at a Netflix special filming for like their commercial of Raw going to Netflix. So it's sad that that's taken place. And Indy Hartwell apparently found out her release through social media, which is a horrible thing. So I hate hearing both stories. Whether at least Corbin's confirmed his. Indy has semi said she found out something similar on her new vlog. I have not watched it. It's over on YouTube now if you want to go check it out. Um, all the best for them. I think they'll all end up doing well. And I especially agree with what I saw Ringside News post up asking if Indy Hartwell would do well over in TNA. Absolutely. That's where Xia Li went. And I feel like she could do just as well and benefit just as much from a fresh coat of paint over in TNA. TNA has been on fire recently as well. So, I mean, I think it would only be good things for Indy Hartwell to make the jump over to TNA. Now, I I gotta say, Ring of Honor is reportedly getting closer to having a TV deal, which, as it turned out, was the reason that they put the ROH title back on Chris Jericho. And I kind of suspected that there would have been some sort of reason for that. Um, I just don't know if it's something that I personally want to get behind or I think is appropriate at this point, because I feel like Ring of Honor is a dead brand right now. I know I haven't been really interested in it. I know a lot of people that watch wrestling that aren't really interested in Ring of Honor right now as well. So I really just don't know if this will work. It's sad to say, but I just don't see it happening. I really don't. And it's again disappointing, but at the same time it is what it is. This is what happens when you have somebody that didn't know what they had when they bought ROH, and they only bought it for the video library and specifically to have the footage for All In, which was great. Yes, great strategic move, but at the same time, uh, you should have had a plan in place. In my opinion, I feel like you should have done a roster split, do an AEW roster and an ROH roster. That could still happen. Tony Khan has said he's still open to a potential roster split, so we'll see how that plays out. Um, we also saw the Malachi Black drama with the stuff that went on with Adam Cole this past week in his match, and people were thinking that this was his swan song, to which he himself has come out like he's done, I think, at least 2 other times and been like, I don't know why these rumors continue to happen. If something changes with my contract or status, you'll hear from me before you hear the right thing from anybody else. But apparently, Malachi's still with AEW. He's not going anywhere, but some people are starting to see that he is not being utilized appropriately. As myself and several others have thought, he could be an amazing single star and honestly one of the tent poles, I should say, for AEW. So there's still time to put some stock behind Malachi Black, as I believe he should have more TV time on both Dynamite and Collision as opposed to just Collision. But speaking of the House of Black, Julia Hart is coming back. We saw a vignette for her on Collision, so that looks like it's going to happen here soon, and I look forward to that because I believe she's had a strong character, and I look forward to seeing her back in the fold, especially with the House of Black. And finally, we're going to talk just briefly about the NXT and AEW Wednesday Night War that was rechristened this past week. Now, I personally thought AEW was going to beat NXT because that is their day. That has basically been their time slot. So I fully expected NXT to lose out to AEW, but wouldn't you know, NXT actually beat AEW in the ratings. And now Dave Meltzer had his excuses for why that happened, that NXT just promoted their show better. Well, so basically what you're telling me then is AEW didn't do their job in promoting their own show better than WWE on a special night. He chopped it up to ECW nostalgia and whatnot, and I don't think that's the case. And if it is the case, then great. But WWE trying to say the excuse that they just promoted their show better, that just tells me that they did their job. That's what they're supposed to do, is promote the show to make you tune in. And it looks like they did just that. So, I mean, you can make up whatever excuse you want, and we know Meltzer does, along with several other things. But it's one of those situations where, yeah, this past week, it was just simply NXT was better. And does this mean that AEW is doing bad? Well, normally I would say probably not. But considering that the 600K viewership range is where NXT wound up, and AEW went into the 500K viewership range, it just isn't good. Something needs to be done with AEW because I want them to succeed, and they should, by all rights, with the talent roster that they have, the new TV deal, and maybe once they're on HBO Max where they can do the simulcast and people like me can just go to Max and watch the AEW product every Wednesday or Saturday night, is just going to make it better for the company overall. But until that time, they've got to figure out something with these ratings, because if they just continue to decline, then it's going to be a bad investment from WBD's point. And we don't know the stipulations of the contract, but something tells me, similar to what Fox did with SmackDown, if they fell to a certain number where Fox was unsatisfied, they did have a right to cancel SmackDown off their network. So who's to say that we couldn't see something similar take place with AEW and WBD? Again, we don't know the details to their contract, but I would be very safe to say that there might be some kind of clause that WBD could get out of that contract if it doesn't meet their requirements. But again, only time will tell, so we'll see what takes place. But guys, that's all I got for you this week. What is your opinion on NXT beating AEW this past week in the ratings? Would it have been just a one-off, and was it just the ECW nostalgia? Also, what do you think of the women's US title? Are you looking forward to War Games, new versus OG Bloodline? And how about the things going over on Raw? Are you looking forward to Priest and Gunter? All that and more, sound off in those comments and let me hear your thoughts and opinions. Make sure you have subscribed to the YouTube channel, hit the bell notification so that you know when a new video is uploaded anytime to the channel, and follow us on all the social media platforms: Facebook under the Four Corner Podcast, X, Instagram, and TikTok. I'll be back again next week to discuss more pro wrestling action. But until that time, enjoy your week ahead, everybody, and just continue to love pro wrestling.